Reading the Atrocity exhibition is like scrolling through a TikTok feed, infected by an algorithm created by a sexually deviant terrorist with a medical science background. Better than food, man. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Better Than Food Book Reviews. I'm your host, Clifford Lee Sargent. Great to see you as always. Hope you're doing well. Get that coffee. Delicious. Today is the Atrocity exhibition by the British author J.G. Ballard, published in 1970. This was a very kind gift from friend and patron Benji. Thanks a bunch, Benji. Really appreciate it. The Atrocity exhibition is a collection of Ballard's experimental writings in the 60s and serves as kind of the prelude to his infamous magnum opus Crash, published right after in 1973. Ballard has described it as a series of condensed novels. These novels range from a few lines to a couple of pages, with titles referring to their contents. The book is an exploded narrative, a collection of disordered moments documenting the protagonist's voyage into lunacy, scraps of a story annihilated by warfare, like remnants of a film reel salvaged from a bombed cinema, a montage from hell, the lost mind of Eisenstein, right? The Atrocity exhibition is an experimental novel that feels like a medical or psychological experiment. There's no proper place to start. Like Ballard suggests in the beginning in the author's note, he writes, "Simply turn the pages until a paragraph catches your eye." This edition includes a preface by the almighty William S. Burroughs, as well as an introduction by Hari Kunzru. Both are fantastic and helped inform this review, as did the author's note by Ballard in the beginning, as well as an interview with Ballard included in this edition following the narrative. Also, this shirt. Silent Servant was a DJ. Terrific DJ. He passed away earlier this year, very sadly, very tragically. He had a track called Speed and Violence, which I linked to in the description below, which was directly inspired, it seemed, at least in the title, by the Atrocity exhibition. So I decided to wear the shirt for the review. Great artist. Saw him a couple of times. Excellent shows. It was a true loss, you know. It really was. Rest in peace, Juan Mendez. Shout out to Becca at Hospital Productions for making these sick shirts. J.G. Ballard, for me, was one of the most interesting authors to come out of the 20th century. His novel Crash is one of my favorite books. To understand where the Atrocity exhibition is coming from, it's very helpful to know at least a little bit about Ballard's biography. I've linked to a great documentary below, which is a very helpful source for this review. As Ballard discusses in the interview included in the book, when he was a child he lived in Shanghai with his British parents in the 30s, and all of them were suddenly placed in an internment camp when the Japanese invaded. He lived there for 3 years with his parents. The only reason they survived, he speculates in this book, is because Japan was bombed by the United States. So from a very early age, he was exposed to the realities of war and the traumatic sudden loss of control. His experience was documented in his later novel, Empire of the Sun, which was adapted into a film by Steven Spielberg. Surviving that, he then moved to London in 1946, which he described as a radically different environment that took some time to get used to. Ballard originally wanted to go into medicine and become a psychiatrist. He studied anatomy for 2 years, dissecting cadavers, and possesses a substantial amount of knowledge on the subject. He also worked a bit in advertising. So you can kind of see how everything's piecing together here, right? And finally, most importantly perhaps, in 1964, when he and his wife were vacationing in Spain with their 3 children, she suddenly, very tragically, died of pneumonia. So Ballard successfully raised their 3 kids on his own while simultaneously becoming a world-famous author. Hats off, man, you know? Unbelievably sad situation. An easy life Ballard did not have. An interesting life, but not an easy one, by any stretch of the imagination. In Kunzru's introduction, he includes a portion of an interview he personally conducted with Ballard near the end of his life, wherein Ballard says that, for him, this book was an attempt to understand his wife's death, along with the horrific events of the era he was living through. From his experiences, J.G. Ballard clearly understands the destabilizing nature of life, reality, civilization, and the material world, right? The entropy of existence. This theme dominates his literature. And he's been called science fiction, but Ballard is so idiosyncratic and innovative that he's a genre unto himself, you know what I mean? Ballardian fiction. Traven, the protagonist of the Atrocity exhibition, is suffering from severe psychological distress. I certainly hope you are not going through anything as serious as he is, and God help us if you are. No, but on a serious note, it is an increasingly difficult time out there in the modern landscape, and taking care of our mental health is crucial if we're going to properly navigate it. And there are many tools that come in handy for doing so. Some of the tools I prefer would be eating properly, getting enough sleep, critical, exercise, whether it's strength training, running, cycling, walking, just moving in general, reading, which has been incredibly helpful in my experience, And another tool is therapy, which is why I'd like to tell you about the sponsor of today's video, BetterHelp. BetterHelp's mission is to make finding therapy more affordable and accessible, which is helpful because finding the right therapist could be challenging given the slim options in your area. Whether you live somewhere rural or in a small town or you're traveling a lot, yeah, it could be tough to find the right therapist in person. But unlike many things these days, they make finding a therapist easy. Because it's online, it's remote, and by filling out a few questions online, BetterHelp can match you with a therapist in as little as just a few days. And it's easy to get matched with a therapist. There's a link below in the description. It's betterhelp.com/BTF. Clicking on that link helps support the show, but it also gets you 10% off your first month with BetterHelp, so you can try them out and see if it works for you. And I sincerely hope it does. And because finding the right therapist is a little bit like dating, as if you needed one more challenge of that nature in your life, I get it. But if you don't initially fit with your therapist, you can switch to a new therapist at any time at no additional cost, without having to worry about health insurance or who's in your network or anything like that. No worries. So if you're struggling right now, and let's face it, who isn't? Please consider online therapy with BetterHelp. And thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring the show. Okay, I'm going to give a summary of this thing. The protagonist of the book, Traven, goes by several different names throughout the story, all starting with the letter T. He is apparently trying to start World War III. He seems to be either a doctor or patient of a mental institution gone rogue, and also seems to have been teaching some classes in which he had a tremendous deviant influence upon the students, who are helping him to facilitate a variety of disastrous exhibitions. It also seems he was a former bomber and technically died for 2 minutes, coming back but forever changed by the experience. A psychiatrist named Dr. Nathan from the same institute, I assume, is periodically analyzing his actions and behaviors throughout the book. I'll read you some. Pre-uterine claims. The author, Dr. Nathan wrote, has found that the patient forms a distinctive type of object relation based on perpetual and irresistible desire to merge with the object in an undifferentiated mass. Although psychoanalysis cannot reach the primary archaic mechanism of rapprochement, it can deal with the neurotic superstructure, guiding the patient towards the choice of stable and worthwhile objects. In the case under consideration, the previous career of the patient as a military pilot should be noted, and the unconscious role of thermonuclear weapons in bringing about the total fusion and non-differentiation of all matter. What the patient is reacting against is, simply, the phenomenology of the universe, the specific and independent existence of separate objects and events, however trivial and inoffensive these may seem. A spoon, for example, offends him by the mere fact of its existence in time and space. More than this, one could say that the precise, if largely random, configuration of atoms in the universe at any given moment, one never again to be repeated, seems to him to be preposterous by virtue of its unique identity. Dr. Nathan lowered his pen and looked into the recreation garden. Traven was standing in the sunlight, raising and lowering his arms and legs in a private calisthenic display, which he repeated several times, presumably in an attempt to render time and events meaningless by replication? So yeah, Traven is conducting a series of demented experiments using his wife and other women in his life. Whether it's real or not, we can't tell. His obsessions include celebrities such as Marilyn Monroe, Elizabeth Taylor, Jacqueline Kennedy. Ralph Nader, who I learned from Ballard was denouncing the auto industry in the 1960s for its unsafe practices in a book he published, as well as the JFK assassination, the Vietnam War, architecture, media, pornography, astrophysics, and technology. Traven keeps searching for what he refers to as a junction, the conflux or synthesis of seemingly unrelated elements, in order to break apart reality in a scientific manner, as a method of gaining some deep knowledge about its infernal mechanisms, it seems. Throughout the book, a helicopter is following him, filming the events, I think, creating a movie of Traven's breakdown. It's a process of exploration through deconstruction and destruction, both physical and psychological, and likely both real and imagined, though which parts are which, we're not sure. What is real is impossible to say. He analyzes pornography, and he, or Dr. Nathan, seems to dream up or actually conduct absurdly psychotic clinical studies on the effects of viewing atrocity films, constructed of the most horrific material imaginable. It's entirely possible I've incorrectly summarized at least a part of the narrative, because this entire book is a total, to employ an academic term, mindfuck. The atrocity exhibition we learn in the book is the human organism, which seems to tie in directly with Ballard's anatomical studies. A couple of strange landscape paintings by the surrealist painter Max Ernst are referenced throughout the book, as well as the work of Salvador Dali and the perverse doll sculptures of Hans Belmer. Those paintings have a beautiful array of colors, but the film playing in my head created by the book always seems to be in black and white, like La Jetée by Chris Marker or the art of Barbara Kruger. Abrasive, shadowy, stark, painful, momentous. trapped moments of high contrast, explosive energy, violence, and sexuality. The landscapes, the sky, the sea, and the runway images in La Jetée, how it all sort of blends together with shades of darkness. That's the space of this book for me. Okay, let's do an attempt at an analysis of this beast. The book is a game, as the reader tries to construct the narrative as though trying to reassemble a demolished building or piece together the identity of a car crash victim. There is a narrative, but it's blown apart and scattered across the highway of the novel. But that's what reading Ballard is like, isn't it? A car crash. You just can't look away. Ballard is a literary neurotoxin. He poisons your system. Like those deadly green books from back in the day made with arsenic. If only we could get some sort of novel sexual pathology named after him and placed in the DSM. Somehow it seems like he'd feel that would be the height of honor, you know? The pinnacle of prestigious posterity. He's in the DSM. Ballardophilia. But what in God's name would it be? I shudder to think. Ballard employs this techno-Freudian syntax. Given the obsessive emphasis on car crashes, it really gives new meaning to Freud's term death drive, right? Lists are frequent in the book, giving it the aesthetic of a medical textbook or clinical study or instruction manual. Right? Parts of it felt like a very strange political or spy novel. There's an omnipresent feeling of claustrophobic paranoid surveillance, predatory voyeurism, right? Kind of like techno peeping Tom. As he writes in the notes to one of the chapters, deep assignments run through all our lives. There are no coincidences. The whole book is about subliminal connections and the breakdown of various barriers between sanity and insanity, sex and violence, celebrity and anonymity, bodies and machinery, even the breakdown between individual identities, it seems. I sometimes mistook Traven for Dr. Nathan and vice versa. I don't know if I'm wrong. I wonder if the character's obsession with architecture is due to the organic form that it mimics, trapped in time, marketing its stability, but simultaneously implying its eventual demise, much like the human body which Traven constantly connects it with. Behind architecture lies destruction, behind sexuality lies rape, behind civilization lies war. Behind life lies death, right? Like his character Traven, Ballard is trying to understand the chaotic elements of existence through obsessive exploration of astrophysics, warfare, technology, sexuality and eroticism, media, and what he calls the psychic cataclysms of celebrity deaths. The obsession with space, time, and geometry suggests that Ballard is trying to understand the material mystery of mankind. Like Traven finding the point of junction, the intersection between bodies and supposedly individual consciousness. Like joining highways, like chemical mixtures, like an orgasm, like explosions. Ballard seems to question the humanity and sincerity of clinical studies altogether, satirizing them in a kind of absurd psychological vivisection upon the subjects. There are graphic descriptions of fictitious clinical studies of war atrocities combined with extremely twisted sexual depravity, as well as the erotic effects of car crashes. It's a hideous book. One might even say atrocious. It takes a lot to make me shake my head and be like, Jesus, you went there. But the commentary, while challenging, is powerful. And more than a little unsettling, right? It's kind of frightening. But while it is atrocious, right? Throughout the novel runs a strain of the darkest dry humor. Please see the clinical study reports under the infamous chapter, Why I Want to Fuck Ronald Reagan, which, as Ballard informs us, resulted in the first printing of the book by Doubleday to be pulped by the order of Nelson Doubleday Jr. himself. One piece of writing is a parody of the descriptions of lineage found in Genesis in the Old Testament. You know, when so-and-so begat so-and-so. Except instead of begat, the word is replaced with shot. So it's several pages of people being shot and then shooting other people. It's called The Generations of America. In another interview I watched, Ballard is speaking about the protagonist of Empire of the Sun, Jim, based off himself, the young boy who spends time in an internment camp after the Japanese invade Shanghai, and says that Jim realizes by the end of the book that, as he puts it, war is endemic to the human condition, and they're deluding themselves that peace will ever come. And The Generations of America is the perfect encapsulation of that idea. The book also features at least one character from Crash, the most notorious from the book, and likely one of the most perverse personalities ever to have been committed to the page. I am talking, of course, about Vaughn, who is in this book is an escaped day patient at the mental institute. The Atrocity exhibition is far less comprehensible than the straightforward narrative of Crash, though it's very similar to it. In some ways, it's almost more unnerving, because it's like you're inhabiting the mind of Vaughn's mentor or associate or something, as if Vaughn was a continuation of an ongoing collective mental illness that started with Traven. It's a fulminating tale of obsession, as though you're viewing the rapidly burning celluloid of an experimental film inside a madman's mind. The book is an atrocity film, like the ones in the book. A perplexing, nauseating, cinematic experience of rapidly sped up war footage, deviant hardcore pornography, car crashes, and surgical procedures, with architecture and landscape shots spliced in. All codes are violated. Alright, so my take on this thing. From the cold visions of surgical procedures, technology, machinery, architecture, chemistry, astrophysics, warfare, corpses, mannequins, car wrecks, sexual violence, and blank monotonous landscapes, Ballard has crafted an unparalleled, modern, ferocious poetry. The major thing you'll notice in the Atrocity exhibition is that Ballard is an extremely perceptive author. The power of the book lies in Ballard's ability to communicate the process of his shift in perception to identify similarities in what appear to be abstract, unrelated elements, sometimes comically unrelated, that he somehow fuses in his process, solders together. This produces a psychopathological synesthesia, the iconic element of his style. The meaning of geometric architectural structures suddenly exudes a violent eroticism previously unsensed. He knows his Freud, he refers to him in the book, and Ballard is fucking with our unconscious, illuminating the dark connections we make but only get vague intimations of before we repress it and stuff it back down and ignore it and try and forget we ever made it. Through this book, Ballard invites us to re-examine our contextual relationship to reality, to view it through a radically different lens. The hard, cold medical report style he employs gives it a timeless quality, a disturbingly timeless quality. Reading the Atrocity exhibition is like scrolling through a TikTok feed, infected by an algorithm created by a sexually deviant terrorist with a medical science background. Modern culture and modern technology begs for a Ballardian interrogation. In an interview I posted with him for patrons, Ballard said, "Modern technology has created the possibilities for our own psychopathologies to play with almost unrestricted freedom. That can be extremely dangerous, but it's worth exploring." Now think about that quote in the year 2024. With the blistering advancement of artificial intelligence, fintech, cryptocurrency, nuclear weapons, dating apps, Twitter, information technology, information suppression, widely distributed pornography, 3D printed weapons, 3D printed organs, and self-driving cars. We live in a Ballardian landscape. We live in something that even he would be shocked by. Writing for Ballard seems like a kind of auto-neurosurgery, right? An excavation of his obsessions and observations, a disturbing yet enthralling process of self-psychoanalysis, and examination of his relationship to society and reality. In this journey of his, we are fortunate to accompany him in the passenger seat, though before you get in the car, you should probably be aware of who is driving. The question I imagine people asking is just how serious is he? He is and he isn't, depending on which mood you find him in. He's a literary sociopath. He is quite serious. But there's always a grin lurking beneath the cold gaze, you know what I mean? In spite of it all, there's an aura of warm complicity emanating from his cold prose, a silent acknowledgement that yes, he too is part of the composition of the Atrocity exhibition. It's not quite the same kind of jaded detachment, implying an intellectually observant author superior to the reader, pervasive in the fiction of someone like Bret Easton Ellis, although in the coldness and brutality of both of them, one could definitely make the comparison. But for Ballard, it's rather a kind of eccentric fascination, a word he uses in the book. Fascination. So what did I dislike? Well, while it's compelling as a violent, confrontational piece of conceptual writing, I felt that his following novel Crash had more impact. The chaotic narrative of the Atrocity exhibition, and seemingly random writings or thought experiments juxtaposed in its composition, distract too much from the power of the ideas therein, for me. Things sort of wither with the repetition. Whereas with Crash, the repetition combined with the cohesion of the narrative magnifies the power of the transgressive element, kind of focuses it, and allows for this progression with a cathartic release much like a car crash itself, gaining speed, exploding, and then fading out. So while the Atrocity exhibition is conceptually and philosophically interesting, loaded with the elements that were forged into Crash, and seems requisite for any fan of Ballard, if you're new to him, I would suggest reading Crash first. While the Atrocity exhibition overall was an interesting experiment, as far as a reading experience, it quickly ran out of gas. It sometimes got pretty boring. I'm not sure if it was the numbing effect of the violence, like he describes in the book, or just a lack of discernible narrative threads to follow, you know? It really necessitates multiple reads. I'm not sure if I will, not immediately at least, but if you wanted to get to the bottom of it, I'd expect that requirement. You might also find a dictionary helpful when reading it. So better than food-ish. 3 out of 5 coffees. Not his best. And with that, coffee time. For those of you who are new, thank you very much for stopping by and watching the show. I take all of the names of the patrons who are financially supporting the show on Patreon, and I place their names in this mason jar. And for every review, I pull out a name. And whoever's name I pull out, I send a hard copy of the book I'm reviewing, plus a bag of coffee, roasted by yours truly. And the coffee is delicious. If you would like to get in on that and help support the show, I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you very much. You can click on the link below or go to patreon.com/books are better than food, and the tiers start at $5 per video. And please set a monthly limit if you're on a budget. Thank you. You'll still get access to all the content I post. In addition, for becoming a paid patron, you'll get access to all this cool stuff. And international shipping is included. All right, thank you very much to all my patrons for helping me keep this thing going, and best of luck. Okay, here we go. Yeah, Silent Servant, man. Some great shows. Zach R. Thank you very much, Zach. Really appreciate it. You're going to receive the Atrocity exhibition by J.G. Ballard, plus a bag of coffee, roasted by yours truly, and I hope you love both. Cheers. Please subscribe if you have not already, and hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed this. And please click the little bell so you get notified every time I release a video, and so I'm not engulfed by the algorithm. And always remember, die reading. All right, great to see you as always. Take care of yourselves. Have a great night. Thanks for watching. Talk to you soon. Ciao.